Okay, let's. I propose that we start, and hopefully more people will join us to listen to the session. Session talking about responsible gambling, but in relation to ESG. We are all obviously, I would imagine and hope, very familiar with the concept of responsible gambling. But ESG, I suppose, has been a kind of a new concept that's been entering into our reporting, into the world of gaming and the world of business. And responsible gambling kind of is part of it or isn't, and this is really what we want to talk about today, right? We want to explore the dynamics between responsible gambling and ESG. But before we go into the detail, into that exploration, I wanted to ask my panelists to introduce themselves first. Quick introduction, very briefly, explaining the role that you guys play in your organizations, in the industry, in particular in relation to RG and ESG, and I will start with you, Ida.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for the invitation today. And I am in charge to manage all the new regulation and responsible gaming and environmental policy for Lottomatica Group as a corporate.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Chetcuti. I'm the head of compliance and player protection at the Malta Gaming Authority. Within the remit of the department is obviously responsible gaming, which we'll be discussing today during this panel, but there's also general compliance obligations, sports betting integrity, and investigations into illegal gambling.
And Pieter, congratulations again on the awards received yesterday, Lifetime Achievements.
Yeah, honestly, I was about to start with mentioning this one, saying that I was honored yesterday, but it's maybe not even because of what I'm doing, but it's because I'm just getting very old. So after a while, when you are at a certain age, then it helps. Anyway, I started to work in what I always call the responsible gambling industry in 1988 with Holland Casino, land-based casino industry in the Netherlands. And honestly, they are still one of our customers. Not meaning that we have been doing the same over 35 years, but there has been an evolution in the whole thing. So we work together with operators land-based online. We work with suppliers, and what we do quite a bit, even here in Italy, to be honest, is that we do accreditation and certification projects on behalf of G4.
Thank you. And as I said at the beginning, kind of setting or introducing the theme of the session, we want to look at the dynamics between responsible gambling and ESG. And yes, responsible gambling is something that the industry has been working on dealing with, tackling for many years. And I hope everyone is super familiar with that concept, but perhaps less so with ESG. So I really, before we go into the dynamics, I wanted to ask Ida, perhaps you, to explain what ESG is, how it made the transition from corporate social responsibility, what are its core pillars?
Okay, for sure, everybody knows which is the acronym of ESG, is environment, social and governance, and the transition between CSR and ESG for sure is the data-driven. And we are really working a lot in Lottomatica on KPIs and data point. Moreover, we are a public company. We are listed here in Italy in Euronext Borsa Italiana. So we have report for our first year through the CSRD new directive. And we work a lot on measurement and KPIs and activities related to ESG.
Thank you. So really we're talking about corporate social responsibility and kind of more holistic approach to those impacts that the industry or a company is making, but with a way more, as you said, data-driven, therefore measurable approach that allows for accountability. Okay, let's look at responsible gambling and ESG. And I have to say, when Alessio got in touch with me and he asked me to moderate this session, which was really kind of contrasting responsible gambling and ESG, I was quite curious because I always, or before I had always thought that they're all part of one thing, right? So I want to go to Pieter to expand on why this angle. Why did you propose this angle, Pieter, looking at the contrast and the possible conflict between responsible gambling and ESG?
Okay, as you know, or maybe have noticed, anyway, is that my focus has been on responsible gambling and corporate social responsibility for a very long time. I have nothing against ESG, to be honest, but I always think it's more the extra, so to say. And what I do see every now and then is that it looks like that ESG might take over or want to take over, or at least if I look at the big companies that write those ESG reports as well, and especially here in Italy like Lottomatica and SNAI, but all the big ones do the same. In principle, I have nothing against it, but we focus on responsible gambling for a very long time already, but I think we are still in the early stages in that way. So that's why I thought sending an email to Alessio saying maybe you should pay attention to the fact that responsible gambling is very important, even the most important part of all the things that you are doing related to ESG as well.
So really it's a risk that, or are you seeing that already being happening where it becomes watered down?
There's one thing which is related to it, because if you look at the EU, the European Union, and what they wanted is that not only the big ones, but I think they wanted in 2026 that also the much smaller companies with a size of 250 employees were supposed to go and write these ESG reports. And I think if I look at gambling companies who are much smaller than the really big ones, then I prefer them to focus on responsible gambling and taking care of the customer than writing a green report. I've nothing against green, but okay.
It's a question of priorities. Marta, MGA has been quite active actually promoting your ESG approach, talking to the industry about it. You are here with us with, and when we look at your focus, it's responsible gambling. So I wonder if you could comment, right, on this concern, I suppose, that Pieter has expressed. What are you seeing, how that works, that relationship between ESG and RG in the gaming authority and in the industry that you are engaging with?
Yeah, I think what Pieter mentioned is a real risk. If we had to look at the concept of sustainable finance, for example, if we had to take it by an analogy, there are a lot of risks of greenwashing, for example. So we want to ensure that that doesn't happen within the gaming sphere. So I really understand where Pieter is coming from. How we see it, however, is that if implemented correctly, they do go very much hand in hand together. So we don't see them at odds, but we see them as complementing each other. How we have built and structured the ESG code is in fact having player protection and responsible gaming as one of the key social pillars within the ESG code. So what we have done is built on top of that, rather than tried to reinvent the wheel. In fact, within the governance pillar, we have AML obligations, for example, which are ultimately requirements still for operators. So we didn't try to impose additional requirements. It's more about preparing the industry to eventually, if through the implementation of CSRD, especially big and listed entities, such as Aida was mentioning, but also the smaller ones, which eventually might be impacted by mandated reporting requirements. So, and what we tried to achieve is initiating the concept of actually recording the achievements of player protection and not setting targets at this stage. So the ESG code is introducing reporting mechanisms, but not benchmarking as yet. And it's something that obviously we're exploring and learning by doing and consulting with the industry to see what actually makes sense. Because obviously we want to avoid situations whereby our operators are mostly reporting and not actually doing.
Mm-hmm. Ida, and over to you. And when it comes to this relationship, right? Like how you manage this within Lottomatica, and how do you ensure that indeed RG, if that's the case, and I imagine it is at the core of your ESG strategy and not watered down?
Responsible gaming strategy have been integrated in our business since the origin of Lottomatica, and we manage all the activities of responsible gaming through special committee, managerial committee, which are taking part all my colleagues of all the business unit. So we work a lot on 4 pillars that are training. We really trust in training, and we have a big partnership with Policlinico Gemelli, and we really trust in training for employees, but also for retail network and also for contact center. So all the people that are in contact with the players receive a specific training related to responsible gaming in order to be professional. So we really trust in training as to become the professional network of retail in Italy. So today we are also certified G4. We are one of the first network in Italy certified by G4, thanks to the training that we enlarge to all our network. Then we work a lot also on information, because all the players needs information. So we work also in corporate campaign on top of what already the law provide. And finally, we work on prevention. Of course, the online give us a lot of instruments, but we work also on the retail for the prevention. And I think that, again, the training is the way to prevent. Because if you have a manager, a floor manager that is really well trained, the consumer can approach the game with more conscious.
So you're not, when you think about the reporting requirements, right, that come with CSRD and with that ESG approach, you're not seeing this being kind of taking the attention away from your commitments when it comes to prevention and responsible gambling?
Okay, sincerely, when we approached the CSRD these years, was really disruptive, because before the CSRD, we worked with the GRI guidelines, and we were used to have our storytelling on responsible gaming. When we approached the CSRD, we really focus on the ESRS 4. S4, that is the one related to the consumer protection, because in fact responsible gaming is one of the part of the consumer protection, joined to AML, privacy and information security. So we spend a lot of our report on the consumer protection, also joined of course with the environmental, but as you say, for the industry of gaming, in the word ESG, the S is by far the most important letter.
Okay, great. And I'm assuming kind of that everyone is familiar with CSRD. If you guys would like an explanation, we can ask here our experts. But otherwise, yeah. Right. So kind of following on this concept of that we discussed about this kind of more data-driven approach. And Marta, you also alluded to benchmarking and to, I guess, measurements, right? And I wonder whether, yes, like ESG can actually kind of benefit as well our approach to responsible gambling in terms of making it more measurable, more measurable, in terms of setting up KPIs or forcing the companies to set up those KPIs and then to report on them as well, right? Could you comment on that?
Yes, we are definitely living in a KPI-driven world, and as a result, in a data-driven world. So it is more about enabling the transition into actually reporting more that what we are doing rather than actually doing. Because we would obviously, given that the regulatory framework has been there for quite a while, MGA operators should have been complying with player protection requirements for quite a while. It's more about us enabling them to actually report on what they're doing, and also from our end is about seeing where the risks are. So we're using that data and those KPIs on ensuring that we are achieving the intended outcomes out of our supervision, out of our regulatory framework. So in terms of us assessing how they are actually progressing in terms of their ESG and RG related obligations is ensuring that we achieve the outcome. So for example, if we are seeing an increase in player complaints on self-exclusion not happening when it's requested or it's delayed, we actually assess more that through our supervision we are seeing a downtrend in those complaints relating to that specific self-exclusion. Obviously, from measuring what our operators are doing, it's through our supervision and through the reporting that operators would be expected to do.
And as you say, very much like the focus is on reporting, but do you see this evolving into then being kind of more having certain targets and setting up certain targets? So it's not just reporting, but actually achieving those targets as well.
What we intend to explore is actually that. So together with industry stakeholders, we want to explore whether actually setting targets, so just to a bit of a disclaimer, currently the ESG code is voluntary. So any operator that wanted to get their ESG seal, they would have done so voluntarily. So that's why we didn't want to mandate specific targets, because they are ultimately learning in the process as well. But that is the intention, yes, because obviously we would have learned through best practices what can be the targets, especially for those entities that won't be in scope of CSRD.
Pieter, over to you. As someone who's worked in RG for many years, how has that concept of KPIs and measurement evolved, and where do you see it going?
Thank you very much, but that's a very difficult, not a difficult question, a difficult answer to a question, because we are not there yet. I mean, and I still think what I mentioned a bit earlier in the very early stages of trying to measure and see what things are working, so to say. So for me, and from our point of view, the key is the player who is in the central of everything that we are talking about, which means that we are focusing on that. And that also means that if you look at certain measures that we would like to take, then the question is, should we do this on a mandatory basis or on a voluntary basis, so to say. And everyone nowadays, especially when you look at different jurisdictions in Europe, if you look at the Gambling Commission in the UK as an example, which was the most liberal one until 5 years ago or so, and now they are the most, I wouldn't say frustrating one, but these are the ones that are setting limits and targets as well. And sometimes I think, and what do we know about the effectiveness? Because if you look at the difference between voluntary and mandatory measures, in principle, I'm very much in favor of voluntary measures, because the mandatory ones don't work. I mean, that's what you see in limit setting in different countries as well. Why Germany, 1,000 euros a month, I think in the Netherlands it's only 700 these days. There are more things that we have to take into account if we look at the content of all these things that we are doing, because what we also do know is that from those who are developing a problem, at the end of the day are the pathological gambler in the old wording, as we still use it, we know that only on the average 10% of all those who have developed a problem is using treatment facilities. And then the question is, what do we do with that? Do we create more possibilities to get treatment? Is it more of the same, or should it be less of different things, so to say? So there are lots of things that we still have to work on and where the operator has to work on as well.
But we've seen some operators, without kind of going into saying specifically who they are, but they themselves, right, like set certain KPIs for themselves of, I don't know, 0 problem gamblers by 2030, or what do you think about this?
That's not going to happen. Well, honestly, I know Unibet's Kindred started the whole story about that, and of course you can set measures, and that's what PAF, the Penning Automaatverein in Holland, did as well. And of course you have to set certain measures, but they have to be workable as well.
Yeah, realistic. Ida, what about you and Lottomatica? How do you measure? How do you set the performance KPIs? What does that look like at your company?
This is another difficult answer because for sure here in Europe today we have an environmental taxonomy that give us the guidelines for the measurement and for KPIs and everything. So it's really clear how to measure the environmental. On social, it's completely different. And it's not easy at all to measure the utility of the social project and activities. So for sure there is a quantity measurement that we already set and we already use. And what we are working on now is the impact. The impact measurement is the real sfida of the real challenge of the next years. So to measure how the action that all the operators is putting in act, the effectiveness of the action, it works or not. So the impact measurement. Also because, as Pieter already said, the problem is the social washing. So if you set some KPIs and you declare these KPIs, is really dangerous in order to have the social washing. Like the greenwashing exists, the social washing. So for sure, the quantity is the way that everybody is acting now, and the challenge for the future is the impact KPIs.
I suppose that also relates to what you said, Marta, about reporting, and then the next stage, right, of that reporting, and actually what will actually make a difference, right, on how you as a regulator can enforce it as well, or encourage. Let's talk about, we mentioned CSRD. Obviously, this is a European requirement. But let's talk about this relationship between, ESG requirements on the European level, right? And we know gambling is regulated on the country level. What is the dynamics here, right? It's Marta, I'm gonna go to you here as the regulator. As we're seeing this ESG focus on a EU level, how does it work, reconcile with that more focus on ESG on the country level when it comes to regulatory measures?
Very valid question, because obviously the last thing that we want is to create more compliance obligations on our operators, which do not necessarily reach the intended outcomes. When developing the Malta gaming ESG code, what we endeavored to do is obviously build on principles that already existed. First of all, to be there in preparation for eventual CSRD related reporting, but also for those who are not in scope yet and might eventually become. So that was one angle. So we used the existing CSRD related obligations and tried to take related standards from there. What we did as well is conduct a materiality assessment on the national gaming industry, whereby we engaged with the stakeholders, with our operators and their consultants to understand where they see that the risks lie from an environmental, from a social, and from a governance. And we came up with a tiered code whereby we selected a number of standard-related requirements in terms of obligations that an operator needs to have, and also aspirational ones. The aspirational ones are the ones that will eventually lead you to the eventual CSRD related obligations. It's not as clean cut. It is very difficult for something to be perfect in line with CSRD. That was not the intended outcome, but at least it enables eventual compliance. With obviously the sector-specific flair, because the last thing that we want is to have obligations that work in other sectors but not specifically to gaming. And that's why player protection is at the core of the ESG code.
And can I ask about your materiality index and assessment as well? I imagine it also kind of showed right, the S, as you talked about, at the core of it. What about those aspirational areas? What are they? And what is the percentage, I suppose, right? Like if you look at the focus, the time that you spend, you know, is it 50-50? Is it 80-20? Or, yeah.
For this first year, we have done the double materiality that have been really, really interesting. Because for the first year, we measure also the financial impact. And so we really focus on the materiality issues that Lottomatica has to approach in the ESG strategies. And have been really important, the stakeholder engagement. So we work a lot on stakeholder engagement in order to achieve what are really material for us. Because if you work on materiality, you need to speak with your stakeholder. And your stakeholders are, of course, not only the financial community, not only the customers, not only the employees, but also the community where you work. So it's really, really important. And this, I think, that helps also to manage all the area.
And Pieter, yeah, just a comment from you as well, again, as this person, right, like who was talking about the risks and kind of concerned about where it's going, having heard, right, because it is down to the materiality index and what it will show in terms of the organizations where they want to put focus, and it seems like that, you know, the social, the S part is still remains the focus. How do you feel about what you've heard and how the shape it's taking?
Honestly, when I listen to Ida and Marta, then I think you have two good examples of what can be done regarding to ESG and the whole setting and all the things that go with it. So maybe we should ask other companies the next time who are not doing a very proper job, so to say. No, so you are more, let's say, the front runners, and I mean, and definitely also related to the regulator situation in Malta. I mean, if I look at my regulator in the Netherlands, they are not even ready to think about ESG or whatsoever, because they are still talking about how do we organize self-exclusion measures, schemes, and what about maximum amounts of money that you are allowed to spend. So we are absolutely not there yet, so to say. And if you do have the possibility, you go further than the others, but there are still. I do some projects for the European Casino Association, and they have a kind of voluntary certification project created, I think in 2016. I think there's only 15 to maybe 20% of all the land-based casino companies in Europe that do have a proper policy and a proper check on their activity, so to say, because the rest doesn't say a lot about what they do regarding responsible gambling and all the efforts.
Mm-hmm. Well, as we've said, right, like so far it's been voluntary. Hopefully we will not have to go into like mandatory reporting. And well, I guess, you know, the people on we do invite generally the speakers who are good examples, right? Because it is about sharing the good examples on stage, and hopefully with that hope that the rest of the industry will adopt those good examples. So I really have a closing question for you. We talked about RG going beyond compliance, but can you see the RG consumer protection, sustainability, not necessarily being just a requirement, but actually being driven by commercial prerogative. And Ida, can I start with you?
I think it can become a commercial prerogative with the new generation. What I see is that the new generation are really approaching all the product, not only gaming, all the product with a sustainability approach. So they are really looking on the environmental aspect, on the social aspect. So I think it's something that is going to increase with the new generation, and also as already Francesco Rodano said in the last panel, is like the la cintura di sicurezza, the seat belt, exactly. It's like the seat belt, exactly. When you are used to be protected, and you get used to be protected, you want to be to protect. So all the tool that our industry is increasing on the responsible gaming, one day, I think that the new generation will approach a lot also on marketing, so became for sure a lever for marketing.
Hey, and maybe just to add, that's not only for the consumer, not only for the player themselves. I mean, if I look at gambling companies hiring employees nowadays, the question of those people that are going to be hired is always, and what about social responsibility? So it's not like in the old days, lip service, we don't do anything, blah, 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 etc.
Yeah, and it's really interesting, right? Like when we kind of have already that standard developed, and it's kind of like part of we're just used to it, right? Like, and actually, okay, we don't have to wear the seatbelts anymore, but it's a standard that we would expect, and we don't, right? Like it's just really our expectation already set. And so I guess like, is the industry still then in that process of adopting and just getting the consumers used to it, to this becoming a standard? And Marta, yeah, if you can comment as well on this question.
Yes, I really do believe that, first of all, I agree totally with my panel colleagues with respect to, listen, the new generation and the existing generation is already requiring certain social responsibility coming out of corporations. But it's beyond that. If we had to look selfishly, if as operators, we can say, we want stakeholders to invest in us, to believe in us, and that we can achieve that if we're showing that we have good environmental, social, and governance responsibilities in place. So if we had to achieve a thriving industry, we need obviously confidence in that industry, and that's what we're trying to instill through the ESG code, whereby we're inviting stakeholders to understand more what the gaming operators are doing, and they're giving back to society, because obviously gaming in itself has sometimes ethical discussions around it, but through the showing of what we do to counter potential gambling harm, that is where we can show more the trust in the industry.
And I manage the Sustainable Gambling Zone at ICE, and we just last year decided to rebrand it from Consumer Protection Zone to Sustainable Gambling Zone. And indeed, part of the reasoning of that rebranding was because we wanted to kind of show that this approach, this new approach where operators are identifying the risks that are protecting the consumer, or giving the consumer the tools so that they can manage their play from that earlier start of their customer journey, that this really becomes part of the retention strategy rather than protection, right? And that, I think, also makes makes a commercial case more than just an obligation, a compliance and a regulatory obligation. So these are the questions that I've had for you guys. Pieter, did you want to comment as well?
Yeah, well, maybe just to add to what Ida started with when she mentioned training, because I think training and carrying out training in its all diversity, so to say, is the most important thing of what we are doing. I mean, I told you in the beginning that we started to work together with a casino company in 1988. they are still our customers. That doesn't mean that we have been given the same training over 37 years or so, but that changes. That changes, and I think that is important for the whole thing.
Yeah, the continuous training. You know, I talked earlier about responsible gambling and artificial intelligence, right? And this also kind of confirms the need for that continuous training, because there's constantly new developments, new research, and new technologies being available for the industry to adopt and hopefully to make this process easier as well and less onerous. Thank you so much. Thank you to our audience as well for being here with us. Big thank you to my panelists. And have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you.